Hello and welcome everyone to the fifth and final webinar hosted by Hong Kong as part of our Race to Zero webinar series, Uniting Asia to Combat Climate Change, building up to COP26, which will be taking place next month. My name is Jasper Hilkhuizen and I am from the Arup office, Hong Kong. Among many things, during the past webinars, we learned about the need to address both the supply and the demand side of the energy equation. Being responsible for 23% of global CO2 emissions, the transport sector has a massive opportunity in our journey to decarbonize. As such, today we focus on the theme of low and zero carbon transport systems, and we are thrilled to have yet again an excellent panel consisting out of renowned leaders from the transport and planning sector. After their presentations, there is time reserved for a panel discussion and for Q&A. So please do post your questions and comments in the chat box, and we'll aim to address those at the end of this session. Today's discussion will be moderated by Mr. T.C. Chu, Director and Global Rail Leader at Arup. Mr. Chu has over 40 years of global experience with previous leading roles at Hong Kong's MTRC, Samsung C&T, and Bombardier Transportation. Now, without further ado, Mr. Chu, over to you. Thank you.
And thank you for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to share, some of our experience and thought, particularly when we are approaching COP26 next month, where the global leader will sit and discuss and determine the future of our climate condition within the world. Now, we are frankly running out of time to take proper action. Jasper quite rightly pointed out that transport play a big part in our decarbonization process. It is necessary for us, all of us within the industry, to unite in an effort to make sure that we find a solution, a cost-effective solution that can actually start to minimize the potential temperature rise that we are experiencing and we are seeing over the last century. This is a significant effort. Developing low-carbon urban transport system is an essential element in supporting and tackling the global climate change. There are many opportunities and options. Today, we have three panelists that will share with us their special personal experience example, and hopefully this will spark some interesting discussion and create some interesting alternative to get various Asia and global megacity into a point where we are actually providing low and a zero carbon transport system. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now put forward and introduce, because in the interest of time, to introduce our first speaker. The first speaker will be Dr. Tony Lee. He's an operational director at MTR. Dr. Lee joined the company MTR in 1991, and he has held various capacity and learning and rising through the rank, and is now the operational director and a member of the executive directorate. You will see that through Tony's great interest in engineering and operational related matter, his presentation topic entitled MTR Climate Change Strategy, you will see that he applied many of his engineering expertise and sharing the knowledge that he has gained over the year to actually enable MTR journey towards a low carbon railway and bus operating system. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can just introduce now Dr. Tony Lee, and to start his 10 minutes presentation on MTR decarbonization journey. Dr. Lee, please.
Okay, thank you, TC. Thank you, friends on the line. I'm Tony Lee, and what I'm going to share with you in the next 10 minutes is about how we embark our decarbonization journey. Okay, next. Saving our world, there is no planet B, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, next. Next, CO2 is something that we want to get rid of, and COP26 will bring parties together to accelerate our action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement, and we hope that we can limit the global average temperature rise to be below 2 degrees or preferably at least to 1.5 degree. Okay, and next. China, 3060, I think you know it very well. For Hong Kong, we have reached the peak in 2014, and we strive to achieve the carbon neutrality before 2050. And I hope that will be our aim to fight for, together. And the national target is also something that we will go through the process with them together and gain the technologies that they go through and apply in Hong Kong. Next is a spectrum of the dimension that you will grab about how our wheel cast number is, our passenger journey is, so that you can see these are all energy consumers, in delivering a good service to our passengers. Next. This is our operation map where we have various places in operating the railway. Hong Kong is our focus, and how we perform in terms of the carbon emission per passenger km. Next, you can see that we are not in the top, largely because we use the electricity basically generated from coal, which is yet to be totally renewable, okay? And we are targeting to reduce our use of coal-generated electricity to run a better gram CO2 per passenger km ratio. Okay, next. Our journey, if you look at the reductions of electricity usage compared with 2018, is talking about 6.1%. We are going to apply more measures to reduce the energy usage, and we are setting a long-term carbon reduction targets. Number one, targets will drive us the result, and we are going to develop a very practical roadmap to achieve our carbon reduction journey. Next, what have we done in the past to decarbonize our railway? Basically, two focus: reduce the energy consumption and maximize the value of every single kilowatt hour that we applied and operating our railway. We optimize the track profile so that we can apply more coasting into the train running, put platform screen doors so that we will not lose all the air conditioning into the tunnel, apply much more efficient signaling system to gain a better energy efficiency, new trains, better drive. We applied air conditioning, intelligent control into our station system, and all the facility will have energy saving operational mode. Next, we focus on 4 areas to see what we can do more. One is the carbon emissions. We explore more renewable energy and cleaner source to drive our trains, okay? We consider more innovations, IoT, and all different type of drives to achieve a better energy efficiency. We apply green design and no carbon design for all the different constructions of the railway. We look into the climate, changes and how our system can be able to get a better resilience, and also for the waste management, how we engage the community to give better education on how they give a green ride in their whole journey. Next, these are some of the examples that we are now exploring, and actually we are just embarked a new way in installing solar panels on our building, because we are limited space and also land use for railway only. Therefore, now we have a breakthrough that we can obtain a consensus that we can massively install panel in our railway premises and then use it to feed it back to the grid. Okay. Next, we also install solar panel on our vehicle. We are just exploring, which is quite expensive, but it is worth to explore to give the environment, a green sort of, ride to our passengers. Next, this shows the Hinking Station. This Hinking Station is going to be our green model station, where we apply all the green initiatives there, and hope one day every green initiative can apply for all 90 or 100 stations in Hong Kong. Next, electric bus. We are going to have 30-something buses in 2 years' time. We have their life expired. We consider that bus using battery or some other power, like hydrogen, is a good replacement of all these diesel engines. And we are also applying a lot of, electric car projects. And therefore, we also install a lot of EV chargers along our stations for people to use their electric car. Next, we have 30, 100-something big chiller, mega chiller, and we have replaced half of them and saved 20,000 tons of CO2 using BVVF drive. And the next coming 2 to 3 years' time, we will launch another 100-something chiller replacement to save the energy. Next, LED light, we massively use all this, and even some of those newly installed light fluorescent tube, we just bite the bullet and replace them all, and we save a lot of energy through that. Next, for train running, we draw power from the power company. At the time the train break, we regenerate all this energy back to the grid, back to the train that is motoring. And for some of the energy that we actually able to feed it back to your wife to have to cook your rice, okay? And we save 174 gigawatt hour, every year, okay? Next, for trains running near to the station, sometimes you will feel that there's some smelly smoke because of the frictional brake. But now you don't have this because we have a inverter that get the last mile sort of energy out of that frictional brake and then regenerating it back to the grid and back to the stations. Next, these are all the energy initiatives saving. For the climate resilience, we have a regular review on how the climate changes will actually impact the operations, and like the flooding and all these landslides risks, and we keep on seeing new initiatives to get a better resilience. Next, we also go through a certifications and assessment, and we recently obtained a first in the world in Asia, the first station obtained the BREEAM green buildings. We only obtained 4-star. We still got 2 remain. In the coming sort of 1 or 2 years time, we hope we can get another 2-star there, for Hinking Station. Next, waste management and also the Lok Ma Chau Sustainable Land is the places that we give a better ecosystem to all the species that you see on the screen. They are real species. It's not photos from the internet. Okay. Next, railway. We have a ballast replacement project. We replace all the timber slipper with synthetic timbers. All this we give them a second life. And all this ballast and all these things will help the world. Next, waste management is all related to public education. We create a carbon wallet app, and all this will help our passengers and our mobile, help our mobility came to be green and smart. Okay, looking ahead, we start the journey, and we hope that we can achieve globally everyone a dream to have a zero carbon, and that is the part that I want to share. Over. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tony. Excellent presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any question for Tony, can you raise it, and then we will come back when the panel sit together as a group to respond to your question, and then perhaps also other panelists can join in some of the discussion. And thank you so much, Tony. We'll bring you back into the panel discussion a little bit later on. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now continue to introduce the second panel. Another example, another leader in the industry, Mr. Adam Leishman, the CEO of Bravo Bus, and also the executive chairman and founders of Ascendal Group. Mr. Leishman lead the London pioneering hydrogen bus operation between 2013 and 2018 when he was a group CEO of the international transport operator Tower Transit. Of late, Mr. Leishman is the CEO of Bravo Bus, and he oversees the operation of some 2,000 buses in the heart of Hong Kong under the City Bus and the New World First Bus brand. Adam is really a dynamic and visionary leader with a track record of success in bringing transformation to the public transport industry. And I hope that you will put some interest in his presentation relating to hydrogen fuel cell driven buses, and then we can look at this alternative mode of low carbon or zero carbon transport system. Over to you, Adam, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chu, and it's a real privilege to be here to stand in front of you and share a little bit of my story and what we're doing in Hong Kong and where we go from here. And if I can get the presentation up, Mr. Chu just talked a little bit about my background, but obviously with my accent, you may have picked up, I'm Australian. I worked in the largest public transport company in Australia, Transit Systems, leading their business development for many years. I then moved to London in 2013, where we founded Tower Transit, running buses in London, and as mentioned, with hydrogen buses, electric, hybrid, a number of different types of technology. And then we were the first international operator to move into Singapore when they changed their model in the bus contracting. In fact, we won the British International Company of the Year in 2017 on the back of that, which was very exciting. And then in 2018, I started a group called Ascendal with the vision of helping cities around the world improve their public transport systems. We're now helping over 50 cities around the world, and we're operating buses in 3 continents. And the biggest operation we have and shareholder with partners here in Hong Kong is the City Bus and New World First Bus operation, where we're moving 1 million people a day. So a huge responsibility, and a huge responsibility to take the industry forward, I think. And Hong Kong is definitely considered a leader when it comes to public transport, and I think we need to show leadership in this area as well. So let's just look at the situation as it currently stands in Hong Kong. We're looking at the transport sector, which contributes about 16% of the emissions in Hong Kong, with franchise buses about just under 2%. Interestingly, 90% of trips in Hong Kong are using public transport, which ranks at #1 in the world on that statistic. But also interestingly, if you look at the stats there, 4.2% of emissions come from private cars, and yet only 10% of trips use private cars. So you can see that before we even start talking about buses and zero emission buses and what we can do to impact on emissions, the best we could do is reduce by 1.8% by making everything zero emission. However, if we just take 5% of trips in Hong Kong and take them from private cars and put them on buses, we can make a bigger impact. So I'm going to leave you that thought for a second. But with regards to zero emission buses, we're really excited that the Chief Executive of Hong Kong recently announced in the policy address that within 3 years there'll be hydrogen bus trials. There's been a big focus lately on electric transport, and we're really wanting to be a big player in this. But let's not forget the impact of public transport being used effectively as a first choice solution. And I just gave you an example in Hong Kong. Imagine other cities where far less than 90% of trips are using public transport. I think we need to not just talk about zero-emission buses and zero-emission transport. We need to talk about shifting people to use public transport as the most efficient use of road space. So let's just quickly skim through the vehicle options. The main three we're talking about today. Diesel buses, everyone's familiar with diesel buses. They've been with us for a long time. Obviously, the pollution that comes with it has improved over the time. You know, over the last few years, we've gone through the different types of Euro buses. We're now at Euro 6. You can see on the graph on the right, the actual emissions are actually very low with Euro 6. But there's also, as well as the emissions that go into the atmosphere, the hydrogen carbons, the NOx, and the carbon dioxide, there's also particulates. We don't talk a lot about, but actually this is the soot that comes into the air from the tyres, from the brakes, from all the vehicles on the road, not just buses, from all the cars. So the more vehicles on the road, we've still got these particulate pollutants, which is what we breathe. And in fact, if you look at a place like London, you're looking at about 10,000 people a year dying from what they say is due to poor air quality. So I think we need to look holistically at this as well. So when we look at battery electric buses, these are the buses where there's a battery stack on the bus. We're charging them overnight for about 6 hours. And then they're operating during the day. No emissions, but we still have particulates to deal with. Hydrogen electric buses or hydrogen fuel cell buses, we're putting hydrogen tanks on the buses. Hydrogen is going through fuel cells while the bus is in movement, and the fuel cell then creates electricity, which then powers the motors. So from the tailpipe, the only emission is water, which is fantastic, but we still have particulates, as we do with every other vehicle on the road, that we need to be thinking about and putting in the conversation as well. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the challenges of each of these three options and the opportunities as we explore what will and will not work in Hong Kong. But let me be very blunt, as an operator, and from an operator's very practical perspective, it's not an easy path. It's not an easy path to just say, hey, we're going to make everything zero emission from this point. We need to think through a lot of things. And there's been a lot of examples of failures over the recent years. Lots of fires, lots of batteries not working, lots of issues with buses not being able to perform to the same standard as diesel buses. We need to make sure that doesn't happen, particularly in a place like Hong Kong, where we're moving 1 million people a day. We need to make sure the service stays to the high standard it currently is. Hong Kong people and people around the world deserve that and need that, or the ramifications would be too costly. But let's just look at let's dig down a little bit more into the options and the challenges we have. From a cost perspective, the infrastructure requirements for these new types of buses is much greater. With diesel buses, everything's established. It's easy to just fill up overnight and the bus is ready for the morning. With electric and hydrogen, we need to think about new types of infrastructure, charging and refueling. The vehicle cost, new technology, double the cost of diesel buses as they currently stand. Of course, that's coming down, but at the moment it's double the cost. Battery costs. With electric battery buses, we have to replace those batteries 1 or 2 times over the life of the bus. That's about 30% the cost of the bus. So there's a much greater cost over the life cycle of the bus. There's also obviously a lot of maintenance savings because we don't have a combustion engine to worry about. We've just got motors that power the bus now through the electricity. Fuel cost, the biggest weakness for hydrogen is the fuel cost. We don't have an established distribution network in Hong Kong or in many places in the world, and the cost of hydrogen is very significant. One of the biggest weaknesses for electric buses is with their range issues is we need more buses. And so that means we need more property, we need more depots, we need more drivers, it costs more to run them. From a tailpipe emission perspective, obviously zero emission is zero. Euro 6 is much better than where we were with the older buses. And in fact, there's another discussion to be had about much more short-term gains by converting some of the old buses with catalytic filters to Euro 6 standards. We can make an immediate and very effective gain by looking at that rather than just going for purely zero-emission buses. That's something to consider. The other pollutants, all of the buses are doing particulates, all of the other vehicles on the road as well. The use of fossil fuels, obviously that's improving, but as was said by Dr. Lee on the last presentation, we need to look at the supply of the energy. Where's the electricity coming from? Where's the hydrogen coming from? We don't have full green solutions at the moment in Hong Kong and in many parts of the world. There's no point getting all zero-emission buses and then using energy that's not clean. As I mentioned earlier, with electricity, there's likely to have electric buses, there's likely to need a lot more buses than what currently operates the fleet. Potentially, in some cases, up to 50% more buses. Now, if you put 50% more buses on the road and the added congestion and all the other cars being used more on the road, you've got extra pollution. So we need to think through those challenges. And of course, the range, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And with electric buses, we have batteries now we have to carry around on the bus. That takes up passenger space. We have less seats, we have less areas for people to stand. That means we need more buses again. So, like I said, there's a path forward, but there's a lot of challenges we need to overcome as an operator. What are the challenges specific to Hong Kong? Well, we all love hiking in Hong Kong, but it's not exactly the best environment for running buses. The limited land supply means it's very hard to expand with new depots if we need new buses and more buses. The hot weather means we need very strong air conditioning. And a very strong air conditioning means we have a big drain on energy consumption, and particularly for electric buses, the battery requirements means we need more batteries, which exacerbates our problem. And of course, it's a very busy, high-frequency network. We're moving 1 million people a day on just our buses alone, not including the others in Hong Kong. It's very hard to have downtime to charge a bus for 6 hours. Okay, there's opportunity, quick charging. Even that's challenging when you have a high-frequency service. So these are some of the very practical issues we need to overcome. But when you look at that on a combined level, actually there's a huge cost to our business at the same time. By doing this, we don't get extra revenue, but we have a whole heap extra costs that we need to somehow cover and solve that problem. So these are some of our challenges. The reliability, with the range, with the heating, there's the funding gap, the new infrastructure required, there's a lot of hidden costs. Where's the energy coming from? Even the batteries themselves. Where's the cobalt coming from? The Amazon jungle? What do we do to recycle those batteries? We need to think through these issues and not just focus on one solution. We need to solve these broader problems. There's a lot of risk with fire. There's been a lot of recent fires with electric buses. Hydrogen buses, another great opportunity, but we're not there yet. We're very early days. You know, there's no bus yet available in Hong Kong to run on hydrogen. The supply of hydrogen is not established at all. We need a new industry to come up to be able to distribute hydrogen across Hong Kong. It's similar to diesel in many regards operationally, but once again, the source of hydrogen. At the moment, there's not many green sources. And there's also a perception around hydrogen that it's unsafe, the hydrogen bomb. Of course, that came from a chemical reaction. We're just carrying cylinders of hydrogen around, so that's highly unlikely. And like I said before, been running buses in London for 10 years around the major areas in London. And you may not be aware of this, but the town gas, the gas that we have underneath all of Hong Kong, 55% hydrogen. So we're already dealing with it each day. From experiences around the world, like was mentioned earlier, I was personally involved in leading a hydrogen bus trial in London. It operated on some of the main streets around the main areas. Very successful over a long period. This started in 2011. In fact, they've just moved into a phase where they've got now double-deck hydrogen buses in London. It works very well. It's effective, but it was not economic. And that's one of the challenges with this new technology. You know, initially, in the first mover stage, it's not economic. So, you know, in that case, London was investing to make it happen, as the Hong Kong government's investing with trials now to make things happen. And we were also involved in one of these with the electric buses that started in 2015. Many challenges. One of the biggest ones is the range issue. You know, on a really hot day, you're only getting 140, 150 kilometres. That's just not enough in Hong Kong, which means you can't put them on the routes all of the routes that need to be covered and keep the high standard that Hong Kong residents require. So the conclusion of that study is there's plenty of challenges still to overcome. So where are we at now? Just to reflect on the battery electric. You know, there's been progress since the early 2000s. The trials that I mentioned in Hong Kong that we've been a part of. We're very excited actually to let you know that we've just taken delivery last week of the very first double-deck all-electric bus in Hong Kong. Very excited to have a look at this and see how the new technology as it currently stands can work. We've got another 2 coming early next year. So we're looking forward to exploring that. From a hydrogen perspective, been around a bit longer. Trials in London have been very successful, albeit expensive. When we came to Hong Kong 12 months ago, we felt actually hydrogen could be very suited to the Hong Kong environment if we can overcome the challenges and establish the industry. So we've been advocating that strongly, and we were very excited to hear the CE announce in the policy address recently that within 3 years there'll be trials of hydrogen buses in Hong Kong, and we hope to participate in that. So, in conclusion, where are the opportunities that I see them in Hong Kong? First of all, we need scientific studies. We need to look at the latest technology, electric buses. We need the latest technology, hydrogen buses. We need them here now. We need to be observing them. And we need to see how we can tailor the solutions to the requirements of Hong Kong, which are very specific and very demanding. Secondly, we need to establish a hydrogen supply chain that just does not exist at the moment in Hong Kong. We need that here, and we need it now. And we hope to play a part to help make that happen. Thirdly, we need green electricity and green hydrogen. At the moment, we don't have that. We don't have enough of that anyway. And we need to collectively, as a industry, work towards making that happen. Fourthly, we need to solve a major funding gap problem. All of these things we're talking about don't come easily and they don't come cheaply. Whilst we have very cheap fares in Hong Kong, a very sensitive issue. We can't just make a massive increase in fares to cover these costs. We need to solve that problem. Perhaps, maybe one solution is an MTR model for buses. Very successful, world-leading model. Maybe we need to look at that for buses as well. Fifthly, and as I said at the start of this presentation, we need to look at this problem and try to solve it in a holistic fashion. Yes, moving to zero-emission buses and technology is one part of the mix, but actually we need to be encouraging people to use public transport as their first choice. Not just in Hong Kong, but everywhere. We need to prioritise buses over private cars. We need to reduce congestion, and we need to reduce the particulates as well that we're breathing every day, as well as the emissions. And finally, I think there's an opportunity here to reimagine how we do cities. Let's make them more livable. Let's make them more people-friendly. Let's make them less focused on vehicles. Let's make them more focused on choosing to live in an amazing place. And that's the challenge that I think we all have as an industry to make the cities that we live in places that are just teeming with life and health and vibrancy. And we've got a next generation that's depending on us to do that. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for that excellent delivery of potential of low carbon, zero emission bus system, and particularly highlighting some of the challenges and the opportunity that one needs to think through, whether it's about energy transition or about funding, etc., and about the technology aspect as well. Thank you, and ladies and gentlemen, if you have any specific question that you would like Adam to respond, please put it in the chat, and we will come to that when we form the panel for further discussion. Now let me now move on. Having heard two practitioners of transport system, railway and buses, let's now move on to a dear colleague of mine, Dr. Bruce Chong. He's a director for urban sustainability, climate resilience, and a smart city for Arup. Done plenty of very interesting work. I really enjoy working with Bruce for his passion and interest in about green infrastructure and smart resilient in city planning. And Bruce is a Cambridge overseas scholar and a research fellow in the Sydney University. I think he played a very active role in the industry, and particularly in support of green resilient framework with the Hong Kong government. Today, he's going to talk to us about embedding low and zero transport system in a city planning project. Over to you, Bruce.
Thank you, TC. And hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and happy to share with you and learn from you. And today I will start by some statistic first. Sorry about sharing a bit more data with you and statistic with you on Friday evening, but I think we need to start from some scientific data first. And as earlier mentioned by Jesper as an introduction, transport sector as a whole represent 24% of overall carbon emission at global level, and in Hong Kong we are a bit better because of more use of proportion of public transport. So 16% in Hong Kong, but overall 24%. And within the 24%, almost 3/4 represents road vehicles, and within road vehicles, we have around 44% of passenger road vehicles and 30% of goods vehicles. Interestingly, you see the emissions from rail is only 1%, remaining shipping and aviation in total around 22%. Now, this is an interesting diagram showing you the energy flow between fuel, between mode, and overall efficiency of this transport sector. Now, the line actually represents, the width of the lines represents the energy flow from fuel to transport mode. Now, on your left-hand side, you see the fuel. You see just the keywords gas, diesel, gasoline, basically electricity represents just only a little bit of the overall consumption. So actually it's fossil fuel focus in transport sector still nowadays. And the middle part basically tells you railway basically still represent a little portion of the overall transport. You see most of the transport, the reef represent heavy road and light road, basically road transport. And the third one is more important. It's about the overall efficiency of energy use of transport sector. It's only 1/3, 32% of overall efficiency. So meaning more than, close to 70% of energy is lost. Now, meaning we are mostly using internal combustion engine, right? We haven't, transferred to electricity motor. We haven't focused on, renewable energy to be the fuel. And so you see obvious option, basically fuel change, mode change, and improvement through technology. Now, this is another interesting figure that I like to share with you, that from IPCC, basically is the carbon efficiency, in other words, the emissions of each transport mode. You see from the top side, it's basically road and then rail, and then water and air. So basically the left column here, as you see my cursor, and also the right hand side here, you see basically the vehicles, the private vehicles, as well as here the motorcycle, represent the most emission per 100 kilometers. And interestingly, it also shows the emission factors quite equal to air passenger. So basically, they represent the most dirtiest, emission. In terms of the transport mode. And comparatively speaking, around 1/3 and 1/4 of emission from an electric rail. And so this is some important figures we need to bear in mind, that in terms of selection of transport mode and shift of transport mode in shaping our zero carbon plan for this sector. So in a nutshell, as I just mentioned, mode shift, fuel shift, behavioral shift are key important strategies for planning ahead, as for new planning. So you see no or limited fossil fuel vehicles, adapt to green, emerging mobility and mode shift, behavioral shift. We also need to think carefully about how we actually deal with our goods and commodities, so smart logistics, and also how do we deploy digital and also related technology to enhance and optimize our transport systems. So based on these strategies, I give you sort of the proposition of the planning that we need to rely on, sort of the philosophy that we need to rely on, of course, as I mentioned, as you see, railway station as a hub, railway transport as a hub because of its low emission per kilometer for each individual community. So it's theoretically speaking, and then you see here different modes of transport, mainly public transport, and then moving on to bicycle and walking. from 500, so half kilometer to 1 kilometer, 3 kilometers to 5 kilometers. So basically within a community, between a community and then intercity transport mode. So you see, if we rely on public transport, the new energy supply for coach, for light bus, for metro is very important. So mainly electrification of all these, long haul transport and is key important, and also new hydrogen and new energy supply, as mentioned by Adam just now. And of course, we also need to pay a very high attention to the design of the city itself, the community design, whether we provide a safe and comfort and convenient environment and direct and convenient link for people to walk around and traveling. This is the most important thing in order to avoid short trip by using vehicles. So now this is sort of for passenger transport. We also need to think carefully about the commodity and goods transport. Now, this is sort of the overarching planning for, from city level to district level to site level. How do we move around our freight goods? So you see for example, from city level at airport, at our transport hub, train stations, how do we bring our goods to district level, and then from district to site level, and then to every household. Now you can imagine electric hydrogen fuel for long haul transport, intercity and within city, more than 30 minutes, more than 50K, this kind of transport, relying much on electric and hydrogen in the future. And one interesting point is that one of our latest planning project is that if we can plan ahead those pipe works for delivering goods, as you see in here, this pipe works or this kind of delivery system, the tubes, basically similar to railway network. So if we can, jointly considered, co-habit or co-use, the tube from railway for also goods delivery, or during construction stage, we need to plan them together, go hand in hand. That would be one of the possible options. Of course, it's more innovative by making use of the railway network as a delivery network in future. And also at the sort of the last mile delivery. Now we mostly rely on the delivery, the goods or the foods now mainly rely on motorcycles, and the emission factor is quite equivalent to the private vehicle. So we need to think about some automatic approach. Like I mentioned, the hydraulic tube and also the robotic system, automatic system. So the digital enablement is also very important to enable all this automatic and robotic system. So here's the sort of the last slide. I try to crystallize some pain points when we are thinking about a new town development, or what we're talking about renewal of the existing urban environment. What are the key pain points and key enablers in order for us to realize towards zero carbon transport sector? Now I start from fuel shift first. As Tony and Adam mentioned, new infrastructure for EV charging facilities. Now this is quite important, because when we are talking about 90 or 100% shifting of private and public transport from fossil fuel to gasoline to EV, then there are a lot of resizing of the new, what we call the EES, electrical substation. There are a lot of considerations of using a bit more land use in order to accommodate the electrical power substation, to accommodate future increase in the EV charging system, especially the supply side needed to take care of them. And also for green and new energy transition, we need to consider, well, for existing infrastructure system like the current petrol station, do we need to consider, transition them to EV charging station, a hybrid mode with both petrol and EV, and then moving on to hydrogen station in the future. Those dangerous goods places, well, we can, in the future now in LPG or natural gas, gradually, incrementally convert to hydrogen storage station. Now, this is some, from planning perspective, we need to, plan it ahead And just mentioned by Adam, the new supply network and storage facilities for new energy is crucial. And renewables from the supply side, in order to make the EV green, is also crucial now. So all levels, from landscape to offshore to infrastructure, along with road and tunnel construction and street facilities and buildings, all different levels needs to be embedded with renewables. And also we mentioned about the green finance. If we need to tailor make and modify to suit, in individual city context, we need to have funding for new technology and also the implementation. Now, moving on to mode shift. As I mentioned, the pedestrian-oriented development is very, very important, especially for short trips. We need to provide a direct and continuous pedestrian network and quality walking environments to make people do the behavioral shift. And in order to do that, apart from hardware provision on the pathway itself, we need to have digital. As I mentioned, the communication, the 5G or 6G low power wide area network is very, very important to enable autonomous vehicles and mobile robots as a last mile. And there are a lot of testing on demand management. So it's not only from the supply side or the transport mode operator, but actually on the demand side, calling for surface, this kind of mode shifting. So the prerequisite basically is the communication network, and not only comms network, but also the positioning accuracy is equivalently important, because when we have the robotics, have the robots on the road, if they don't have accurate position, how do they find your home to deliver their goods? So the PNT technologies, ranging from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth to beacon to satellite, and also the seamless transition between outdoor and indoor is also another enabling factor to make things happen. And finally, I think it's also very effective. It's about carbon and emission tax. Now, we mentioned a lot of different modes. Now, in order to make mode shift to realize, especially from private vehicles to public mode of transport, we need to have a fair taxation system and charging regimes to reflect the environmental impact of each transport mode. Meaning we have to build up this kind of charging taxation systems to give a strong signal to push people to shift their mode actually by this penalty and the carrot and stick. Now, so here is sort of a nutshell. Would like to share with you that are all essentials to make things happen to zero carbon. So hope you have with me so far. Thank you very much.
Something interesting, thought process about fuel shift and mode shift. Thank you for sharing that. Food for thought for many city planner and government to think through some of this challenging process. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard 3 very special presentation, interesting presentation, and now we are on to a panel, assembly of a panel member, and I see a number of questions has already been raised. Now, one of the interesting topic, perhaps the 3 panelists can kind of respond to, is what I hear from the presentation from 3 of you. Energy transition seems to come out quite regularly, and it is a key significant challenge. Whether energy transition from coal to LNG to renewable and to nuclear in some country where it is one form of energy transition, but for transport mode to transition to from a diesel to hydrogen to battery, all these are extremely challenging and expensive. Beyond funding availability and things like that. Will the panel member just like to actually share their thought about how best one can manage this energy transition?
May I share my views first, okay? I can be open and frank to you that, electricity, the source is very important. I run the whole fit for the whole Hong Kong network. I can tell you I spend 1.7 billion tariff a year. All come from coal and all different type of, a mixture of the natural gas. If we have to go for all renewable energies, forget all the coal, I can see that the price could double one day, that you have to find way to finance this green initiative if you go along with that, number one. I also now explore using hydrogen to run the light rail vehicle. There are vehicles that actually run in hydrogens. In looking into that, we have great hydrogens, we have blue hydrogen, but the ideal one is green hydrogen. And for green hydrogens, all from the electrolysis process of the H2O2, the cost is huge. Using solar panel, I make a guess, if I have to drive one car, I have to put all the depot area with solar panel in order to drive enough bottle of hydrogens to run the light rail vehicles. The investment is huge. Therefore, the subsidies from all these different parties should consider the cost of, anyway, green bill to pay.
If I could echo.
Adam or Bruce, any response to that? Any comment?
Yeah, if I could echo what Dr. Lee was saying, absolutely. We have a tremendous challenge ahead of us in solving the funding gap. As an operator of buses, traditionally you buy a bus, you fill it up with diesel, and off it goes, and you're a bus operator. Okay, I'm simplifying it. These days, you need to think about where's the energy coming from, the infrastructure that you need, what type of bus you're going to use. Even within e-buses or hydrogen buses, you need to work out what kind of charge points, different types of charging infrastructure, opportunity charging, overnight charging, and then all of the sourcing issues that Dr. Lee just talked about. We're moving into the energy supply chain. We're moving into construction supply chain. It's very complicated, and I echo the previous comments that the cost is astronomical when we look at it. And so, I go back to my presentation as well. We need to look at this holistically and how we solve this problem. Just jumping from one day to the next from diesel to zero emission is a very, very difficult challenge, and we can compromise a lot of things, not least of which is the financial economic feasibility. And as a bus operator in Hong Kong right now, the commercial model is really struggling. So if you want to add zero emission to that, we need to come up with other solutions. And so, we're trying to think, how can we do that apart from just putting huge fare increases in place that no one wants? We need to come up with alternate solutions. And we think maybe the real estate angle, co-development of locations, creating more livable cities like the last, like Bruce was talking about, where we can integrate these things. I mean, my fundamental belief is the public transport should be the heart of urban planning and urban design. We should be the lifeblood of the city and not an afterthought. And perhaps there's a way to deal with that. And in fact, the MTR model for the last 20 years has really opened the world's mind to how things could be. So I think we need to explore a whole new paradigm when it comes to public transport to solve this problem.
Thank you, Adam. I mean, frankly, if people really look deeply into the energy and electricity production, over 80% of our current energy, electricity are actually produced by fossil fuel, type of a related type of power generation. And while many talk about renewable, the percentage is very small. And Tony, you are absolutely right. The delta between the carbon-related production and your renewable is big gap, and it is question of affordability. And that's why I think the energy transition issue and the interdependency between industry is quite important. It becomes an important issue to challenge. Now, lead me to, while we are deviating away from the basic transport modes and things like that, Tony, do you think that it will lead to authorities start thinking about power generation of their own electricity requirement? Because maybe that will be a more successful way of transiting if the electricity generating company are not prepared to collaborate. What do you think?
I think that open a new thinking. If the user actually able to find a better way in generating energies, the regulations and all this will come into the table to discuss. And also how the whole business model can actually, like the RPP model that you finance the way to run, and you say any A plus energy plus whatever model that can enable the operator to finance the green initiatives. I think all this funding, all these power generations, all these things will have to look into all this scheme of control, all the system that we are now operating on the financial framework in making a green path for that to be commercially, financially viable, so as to not make a break-even sort of investment. It's really something that you can do something totally out of the box in terms of renewable energy.
Excellent, thank you. Bruce, from a city planning perspective, what sort of message we from the transport industry wants to actually say to the energy company to say, in order for us, we need to collaborate and how we can go about supporting what message? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just follow what Tony's mentioned, the distributed energy approach, right? It's not only a utility company, but every developers, everybody, individual can generate themselves, right? So this is sort of a new approach, and I think the government should make this mechanism works and demonstrate how this can help the whole sector. And another point, I think the supply side itself can also innovate. For example, some mega project now we are thinking ahead is that we mentioned about hydrogen production, where the hydrogen should come from. Another perspective is that now plan B is that if green hydrogen is not available enough, then we need to actually carbon capture storage for natural gas electricity production. So meaning our CLP or Hong Kong, they need to capture carbon. So where do we capture our carbons? Another issue, right? Where should they be put? Should they be put underground? Should they be put in a cave-in? This kind of, large space. And it's not only 2 power companies in Hong Kong, basically a whole region. So it's talking about the Greater Bay region. It's more than 100 numbers of electricity plant. How do we collectively put our coal-fired plant and natural gas plant? Where do we put our carbon, along the 20 years if we are not successfully and timely to convert into renewable energy 100%.
Very interesting. Let me bring back a question that's asked by the participant, the audience. This is a question for you, Tony. It's about railway resilience, and because of climate change, the uncertainty about potential flooding, etc. And question to you is what kind of railway resilient consideration have you put in place to counteract the climate change impact?
Number one, when there is a flooding risk coming, it is not all of a sudden. There is a time that the flooding level will build up. We'll have a mechanism. If necessary, we stop the railway. Okay, number one. The current design is based on 1 in 200 years of flooding, which is the citywide sort of standard, CEDD standard. But for us, that for our station, we have 3 staircase steps, talk about 400 something mm. And we've built floodboard 1.2 meter. And for that, it's sufficient enough to at least prevent water from coming in based on 1 in 200. Based on the latest climate forecast, we have a regular review. By 2200, based on the severity of this flooding and the level of all this rainfall, this 1.2 is marginally okay, based on the prediction by 2050. But this is all crystal ball sort of guess. The climate changes could be more severe than that. therefore we have a regular review on that. I hope I can answer this.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And obviously, from our perspective, we've been challenged by our client. So we actually trying to port across this. Right, I'm beginning to talk about interdependency between industry. We have used the water industry, using artificial intelligence and satellite technology to give early warning of, impending potential flooding, to buy time for the railway to respond to additional protection. These are some of the things that we are doing, Tony. Absolutely right. Whether, Adam, anything you want to add? What about bus services? Anything concerned? And there was a related question that's raised about hydrogen or battery buses. How do they respond to bad weather conditions? Are they as reliable, as competent as a diesel-based bus? Would you like to respond to that?
It's an interesting question, and particularly in light of the recent typhoon, I'm sure many of the people watching would have seen some of the viral footage of some of our buses driving through the floods and with water coming into the buses. If you can imagine that being an electric bus, that's not a good thing. So there are obviously considerations with regards to those kind of scenarios, but I don't think we have the same kind of challenges as perhaps the fixed railways underground, etc. But these are just one of the many challenges to overcome as we move, and we have to think through all the different impacts. That you might not have experienced with the previous types of technology that we've had. And that's why I'm a big advocate, particularly in the bus space, that we need to do scientific trials. We need to spend time testing the products and seeing how it works in Hong Kong. My biggest fear is that we rush into this too quickly, and we have 1 million people a day that no longer can rely on our service because the technology is not delivering to the standard that they expect. We need to make sure that we kind of measure this up against, from a practical perspective, we still need to deliver the service day in, day out for the people that demand and expect it.
Adam, this is Tony. Actually, we should gather ourselves together to dream how we can run hydrogen bus, because we have we need more support to the city, so that they have statutory support and all this government support also required. Yes.
Absolutely, and more than that, we should get together and talk about how we can make a more effective network, because the more people that use public transport, we can almost have a more short-term impact on reducing emissions if we get modal shift. And the best way to do that is have an effective network that works together rather than in competition with each other.
Exactly. I think this collaboration is so important to build a smarter city, greener. I think that is a good idea. Excellent. Excellent.
I think, Tony, I think you can expand beyond that to explore with the Irish government and also with London Transport, because they are also on the journey to migrate towards a replacement of a full electric or hydrogen bus fleet. Yeah, so something like that, I can make the connection for you guys as well.
Excellent. I just want a very small fit, compared with Adam.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that, Tony.
Bruce, from a transport planning perspective, I think you touch on the fuel shift and the mode shifts, but specific to railway and things like that, in the planning process, your thought about the weather impact, the climate change, which inevitably will get worse before we bring it under control. What kind of suggestion or thought process you have gone through in the transport planning thinking?
Thanks, TC. I'm aware of time, so it's just a quick response. I think we need to consider future climate scenario. As Tony mentioned, 1 in 200. Well, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, it would become 1 in 150. In 20 years' time, it would become 1 in 100. So I think we need to consider future climate, i.e. the future climate projections. What would be the extreme weather in the coming future, and how do we accommodate all these projections to our new station, new railway lines?
Right. I've been told that I over abuse my liberty and exceed the time slot we set for the discussion. I just like to thank the three panelists, all three of you, Bruce, Tony, and Adam, for delivering a very thought-invoking presentation. And I hope that the participants get as much as I have out of the presentation, food for thought. And if you have any further question, I think the line is open for you to raise, and we will endeavor to get the panelists to respond where possible. I think that's a normal arrangement. If not, you are welcome to drop a note to Arup, and we will try to endeavor to answer your question. Important, last message. I think I've recently heard Mary Robinson, the former president for the Irish government, say that it is not just the industry that need to take action. Each and every one of us have to take ownership of the way that we actually go about doing our daily life and take responsibility to save this fragile world by giving ourselves each a commitment to actually act appropriately towards decarbonization. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, panelists. I applaud to you, and I appreciate that. We will catch up soon. Tony, Adam, and Bruce, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, gentlemen, for excellent presentations and an even better panel discussion. Unfortunately, time is short, so we don't have enough time left to fully tap your collective brains. Now I would like to pass the virtual floor over to Dr. Vincent Chang, Arup's East Asia Sustainable Development Leader, to share some closing remarks. Vincent, when you're ready, over to you.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you are. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this Race to Zero webinar series this week. In particular, our speakers who share with us their perspective and I think more importantly, the best practice in combating this climate change in the 5 cities. The event has received overwhelming support around the world with over 1,000 people registered from 30 countries, which demonstrate the importance and I think imminence of the climate change agenda worldwide. The discussion throughout this week provide countless valuable insights across the regions, I think more importantly around the world. The content, of course, is too much for me to sum up here, but I still like to share some of my takeaways. Well, firstly, the scale and urgency of climate change require actions from all sectors, all geography. I think, as TC just mentioned, more importantly, from all of us. Success can only be achieved through collaborations at, say, global or regional and more important, at local levels. And secondly, and then these Race to Zero series has contributed by bringing together like-minded stakeholders and fostering communication channel between them. But I think more importantly, we need them to work together to accelerate the actions from governments, business sectors, and also civic societies. Thirdly, I think the discussion also provides us a lot of hope. I mean, we're hopeful because we learn that in these regions, there's a lot of action actually have been taking place in many key areas, range from energy production, green transport, and also building efficiency, and I think more importantly on the nature conservations. So fourthly, that well, we know that solutions for climate change may differ country to country, but I think we are glad to hear these days that we see how all these efforts and also initiatives done in these cities actually have led to multiple benefits. The phase, the language of talking on the win-win solutions actually have been quoted several times appear in the session these few days, and for definitely good reasons. We know cleaner cities more and new employment opportunities, increase biodiversities, and enhance social equities are just a few kind of benefits or values and these journey to zero carbon actually can bring to the society and the world. And lastly, I actually myself also feel with hope, although that we know that it's highly possible that we can avoid climate change, but if the world can come together and work together, we still have a chance, a very good chance that a healthy balance between beautiful planets and also the development needs of the people who are living on it can still be there. I mean, we can still have kind of well balanced on these two needs. So our discussions will be shared to wider global communities through the COP26 platform happening early November and other subsequent events. We therefore look forward to working with you closer in the future to continue our journeys of decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. A final thanks again also to all speakers and all members of the audience that joined us throughout the week. Thanks also to our supporting organizations, especially also our strategic partners that made the Race to Zero webinar series possible: the British Consulate General, Hong Kong, Civic Exchange, the Institution of Civil Engineers, the World Green Building Council, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Now, please be reminded that the recordings of all sessions will be made available shortly on the event webpage. And also do note that as part of the series, there will be a physical event held in Beijing on November the 9th, which you will be able to join through a live stream. This will be in Mandarin only, so please be aware of that. All in all, do keep an eye on the event webpage for information. So that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good remainder of the day and have an even better weekend ahead. Thank you and bye for now.